Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, or evening. This is the Employee Handbook podcast. We're sticking with that one, right?
Yeah, I think employee handbook, it's good. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, it's definitely good. There was too many TPS reports. I don't think people still understand what were like Bob 1 and Bob 2. It was definitely a reference to Office Space, which if you have not seen that movie and you're listening to this podcast, well, I don't want to tell people to stop listening to the podcast right now and go watch. Maybe you can do both at the same time. Just keep this podcast on loop for hours and hours and hours, like when you're asleep and all that kind of stuff. But
Oh, yeah. Keep
yeah,
those views up. But yes, so welcome, everybody, to the Employee Handbook podcast with the Bobs. I am Ryan Ellis, and
um,
the much more deep and sultry voice, Arta Wildeboer.
hey, how you doing? I always feel my voice is super nasally when I hear it. It's kind of scary. But my mom told me I should be like a sports announcer or something like that. So
I think you'd probably do a good job with that. But the other thing, though, to your first point is no matter what you say, when you listen to your own voice, it just doesn't sound the same.
it's
It
awful.
doesn't sound like as cool as you think it is. And
Yeah,
every time I do it, I'm like, ugh.
I've actually never listened to any of the episodes.
Well, then you're in for a treat, my friend, when you listen to this episode.
I don't want to hear my voice. All right. Well, this is kind of a momentous watershed moment. It's weird because a lot of times you see people evolve over time and you see how fame and success affects them. And really now we can see this in real time with us and how we develop because just a few weeks ago we didn't have this podcast. And now, I mean, I don't want to brag, but in the last 30 days, we have 52 downloads cumulatively of all our podcasts. So I want to start out, Ryan, by asking you basically, now that you're famous, how has your life changed and how do you plan on staying grounded?
You know, I ask myself this every day for the last 2 days. And it's very difficult, honestly, to walk through a TJ Maxx without being noticed.
Yeah, yeah. But
It's
that's probably
amazing.
because you're not supposed to try on women's clothes in the aisle.
Are you somehow poked into their security cameras? How do you know this?
No, that's from personal experience. When you
Well,
when you find something in the women's section that's 5XL that just fits perfectly, I don't have time to
not a
mess
better
around.
feeling.
Yeah. I can't make it all the way up to the other side and explain to the lady at the changing room. Anyway, so we're both dealing with fame in different ways, apparently. And very very proud of what we've been able to accomplish. It only cost me I think like $500 in LinkedIn post boosting to get this far. So really, the ROI has been tremendous, and I want to thank all of you who are here from LinkedIn, friends, enemies, colleagues. Stalkers, whatever it is, whoever you are, all around the world. So big up to you. Um, and
Could have done it without you.
yeah, could have done it without you. Thank you so much. You were here from the beginning, and that means a lot to us. So thank you so much. Uh,
Yes.
so let's get into it. Ryan, on today's episode, I want to talk about the relationship between companies and their outside counsel. To the folks who don't know, Ryan has been a defense attorney in employment law in California, Nevada, Texas, Michigan, and works very closely with clients who are corporations to advise them on employment law matters, updates, all that good stuff, has defended them in court, handled litigation for them, and wanted to talk about the sometimes complex relationship between outside counsel and corporations.
Yeah, it's funny. So one of the things that I learned working for a big firm was that your client is not really the company. Your client is inside general counsel, and I am that outside counsel. And without having a good relationship with the inside general counsel and sometimes the legal team, you have a problem with the client because obviously you're being hired by the client, but through general counsel internally. Um, Before I go to that, go ahead,
Let me
Arta.
get in there real quick. So for people who don't know, I'm thinking to myself, if I'm looking at this from the outside as somebody hypothetically who doesn't understand what general counsel's role is in a company, why, as the CEO, if I've already hired general counsel, why can't I just tell general counsel, hey, we just got sued for discrimination. You handle it. So tell me a little bit more about why that's not the typical arrangement.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question that we could probably do, I don't know, 25 podcasts on. But the main reason is when you, like in larger companies, when you have a general counsel, the general counsel's purpose, again, generally, the general counsel's purpose is to help the firm or the company internally to make sure everything is managed, make sure compliance is met, make sure the general corporate filings are met, make sure the corporate meetings are held, make sure if there's any internal contracts that are going out to vendors or received from vendors, or clients, whatever, those are all reviewed and okay. Not low level stuff, because a lot of this stuff is very intense and time consuming, but also because it's so much work. It's just so much work. But then you come out, general counsel needs to hire outside counsel, or sometimes they'll hire internal litigation counsel. That happens like with governments, for example. They'll hire litigation counsel specifically for certain areas of law, like enforcement actions, whatever. And again, depending on the county and the municipality, it varies. But so for outside counsel like me in these situations, I'm a litigator, or was a litigator mostly. Well, I guess I still am. I'm still a litigator. We talk about HR stuff, but my history is litigation. So in doing litigation, it's a specialized field. Specialized field, not because it's difficult to do, like any attorney can do it. That's what we're licensed to do, is to represent people in court or otherwise. But doing this for so long, you learn so much. Like you have to know civil procedure, you have to know courtroom procedure, you have to know how to handle yourself in a courtroom, you have to know how to present to a jury in jury trials, you have to know how to argue, you have to know how to prepare motions. There's a lot of things procedurally that you do for your client as a litigation attorney, or whether plaintiff or defense, that you would never know existed if you were just internal counsel dealing with contracts, due diligence, mergers and acquisitions, minor demands outside. So that's the main reason, is it's a different skill set. And again, not overall, not a difficult skill set, but it's just a different skill set. It's very hard for me, or was very hard for me, to do a lot of internal corporate stuff when I first started going into that a while ago. But I mean, I've been doing it again for so long that now I have a dual skill set. So that's the main reason. And internal counsel can't deal with all the things, like internal general counsel cannot deal with all of the things that are required of litigation counsel, and do their normal 9 to 5 required job of contract review and stuff, especially in times of trial. Trial could be months long. You can't just have your general counsel, who's essentially handling all of your legal stuff, just gone for a month or two. I mean, that doesn't work that way. So that's the main reason. And again, without pontificating any further on this one, it's a very inundated task for general counsel. They have responsibility wise in the company, and then outside counsel, or just kind of overflow counsel if they do corporate work. That's one of the main reasons.
And from the outside, as a plaintiff's attorney, we think of general counsel for a company as someone who also is there to find outside attorneys and negotiate their rates, and find the best rate for the company. Is that something that is typically you find general counsel does, or is that like a kind of CEO, CFO job?
It just depends. Local counsel, in my experience, is, for my example, is this one person who is head of, either director of legal operations, or chief legal officer, or just general counsel for a certain division or sector of the business. That person will, when coming into a company, like being hired today, for example, if Coca-Cola or a named large company here hires me as general counsel today, I'm going to come into a situation where practices and policies have been put into place by the previous general counsel. Usually, the new general counsel will bring in outside counsel that they trust and have worked with for a long time. And then there's a change of guard, kind of like when the president changes, his cabinet, until, as of now, no females have been elected president, but when they are, it'll change to her. But when the president comes in, his or her cabinet changes along with it. Sort of similar to the general counsel situation. But yeah, it's that the general counsel is the gatekeeper. I don't remember what company it was, but at my old firm, we would spend a lot of money whining and dining general counsel for large companies just to get on their radar if like they had overflow or they needed something in our jurisdiction that they can't handle or whatever. But general counsel is a gatekeeper. The CEO or C-suite employees, directors, officers usually trust pretty highly in the general counsel's opinion. But yeah, the general counsel is the gatekeeper, and that's the person you need to win over.
So, how typical is it for a company to have general counsel in terms of size? What is like when a company gets to a certain, what size do they need to start looking for a general counsel, like in your opinion? I know there's not a hard and fast rule about this, but is there like a best practices recommendation that you have for that?
Yeah, good question. It's funny, I've never been asked this specific question before, but I think a good gauge on whether or not you need an internal general counsel is looking at how much time you, as like a C-suite employee, or you as a company is spending on legal. If you're paying your outside counsel over the average salary in your jurisdiction for what a general counsel would be paid, that's probably a good time to look at hiring a general counsel. For example, you might hire me, Arta, to make sure your corporate formation is correct, to make sure you follow all your corporate like guidelines and requirements in your state, and to review contracts. If you have a sales business, that might be the contract part of it might be hours and hours and hours a month, which at my rate would cost you way more than hiring internal counsel. I think that's a good gauge of looking at it. But usually I see general counsel in smaller companies, but I think the smallest company I've seen that had general counsel was 100 employees. Again, not very small. It's a lot of risk and management, but yeah, I would gauge it off of expense on legal.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, because you're right. Different companies have different legal exposure depending on the industry that they're in. Do they have a lot of wage and hour workers? Do they have, is it mostly kind of executives or engineers, things like that? I think all those things in terms of how much exposure you have to wage and hour suits or discrimination and things like that goes into deciding whether or not you need general counsel. Set up important policies for you. And again, we keep promising we're going to talk about the handbook one day in depth, and we will. But does general counsel have any role in say reviewing the handbook or creating a handbook? How do is that something you've done?
Yeah, I've done that countless times on all of the fingers and toes that we both have for companies large and small. Reviewing handbooks, reviewing policies, reviewing procedures, giving legal opinions as to, hey, we have this complaint, here's our policy and procedure, what do we do? All of that. It's funny because usually the process involves HR preparing. Let's assume let's assume this company we're talking about has internal HR. The HR department individuals will prepare a handbook, or review the handbook, revise the handbook pursuant to new laws, whatever, all of that. The director of the HR department will usually also review and approve, and then take that to the C-suite. C-suite either reviews it and sends it to legal, or the C-suite says, look, we're not reviewing this until legal sees it. Then at a certain point in time, legal reviews it, gives it the blessing, and then the C-suite gives the final okay, which usually is, hey, has HR done this? Hey, has director of HR done this? Hey, has legal approved it? Okay, good. But that is usually the way it goes. And whether internal or external counsel is involved, again, companies that don't have GCs would be skipped and go right to outside counsel. But if there's internal counsel, usually that person would be fit right in between the C-suite making the decision and outside counsel making the decision. And then again, outside counsel's involvement with internal GC as to handbooks and policies and procedures would depend on the company's trust in that internal counsel's ability to understand the changes in law. But again, because unless there's not an extremely large internal counsel or general counsel department, it's probably best to always have an external counsel who has like their finger on the pulse of employment law to touch those things and make sure that outside counsel gives a blessing, because internal counsel usually doesn't have exposure to that high level of changing laws and everything.
Yeah, and I just want to point out as well, if you're not, say, currently or have not been in litigation and dealing with litigation directly yourself as an attorney, sometimes it's hard to gauge how much exposure you have in terms of dollars, just depending on the legal environment. What cases are hot, what issues are hot, what are courts really keying in on and trying to punish companies for, or not considering important. So as a attorney, let's say you're general counsel and you get sued by somebody for a certain thing, you might think you have a huge exposure there when in reality, outside counsel can come in and say, no, listen, in the past 2 years, these types of cases have not been getting huge verdicts. So it's not a lot to worry about. And that'll really change the way that you try to negotiate with plaintiff's counsel, I think.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I've said a lot about internal counsel and external counsel and how you find them. From your perspective, how do you find a good lawyer, or how would you advise, like if a friend came to you, hey, lawyer, hey, Arta, I have this issue I need you to help me with, and this is something you don't handle. Like, let's say it's a maritime law situation where you're dealing with a ship that sunk and treasure, and I don't know if you have experience in that, but let's assume you don't. How would you advise that person, like a friend of yours, someone you want to give good advice to? How would you advise them to how to find a good lawyer?
Well, I think references are always the best way. You just find a lawyer that you know, or find your friend who's been sued the most, and just kind of try to get references from them.
Hopefully you don't have a lot of friends that have been sued a lot and there's a comparison of how many lawsuits they've been dealing with. But sorry, I just want to make sure that all of our listeners understand that although we're in California, we don't live and die by lawsuits.
Yeah, I guess it depends what you're getting sued for. That could be a whole other episode.
Yeah.
I think that the best thing to do is ask attorneys that you know or you've dealt with. I think most people who are in a position where they're running a business would know somebody who's an attorney or have dealt with attorneys in the past. I think that's really the best place to start. And if you just don't know anybody, you can always contact your local bar association. I'm not sure what.
Have you ever? I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. Have you ever contacted your local bar association?
To find
Ever? No,
out.
in general, have you ever contacted them?
No, I don't think I have.
This is a time to pontificate, or this is a time to discuss a story that I have with that. When I first became a lawyer about 2 years in, and I had experience, I walked into a bar association. Just like physically walked in back before the world relied on internet and Zoom and hiding behind computers. I walked in, I asked the receptionist, "Hi, my name is blank. I want to help. How do I help you? I will do it for free, because they do this referral service and all that crap." And I got shut down like immediately. They said, "We're not going to meet with you. Not going to talk to you." And then finally, I figured out that they have an application process, and you have to have all these insurance requirements and blah blah blah, and all the stuff we have. But people, bar associations, and legal service providers that offer like pro bono services to the indigent, make it so difficult for people to help other people. It was sad. So I just want to add that. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're a bar association, make your processes easier for us attorneys to help people that are indigent or less fortunate, please.
Yeah, that's a great point, because we get tons of calls at my office for issues that are not lucrative for an attorney to help with, or are usually just kind of the area like Social Security law, or a lot of custody stuff happens, and family law where people cannot afford a lawyer, but it's not something that's necessarily lucrative for an attorney, or lucrative for an attorney, or they can't afford it. And a lot of these legal associations, or you're right, these local associations, very difficult to see anybody and get help with those. So that's something when they talk about lawyers being for rich people, or that's really what they're talking about. There is a shortage of legal aid that's available for people who can't pay kind of $500 an hour. That really needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it's sad. It really is. But what can you do except hope people come to you when they need it and you can actually help them? But anyway, sorry, I'll step off my soapbox for a moment. What you were saying, how to find a good lawyer, referrals, and then I interrupted. I'm sorry.
Well, so yeah, I mean, I think referrals are the best way. I mean, if you really want to get deep into it, I think you can read legal journals in whatever area, and maybe find somebody who's written an article or something like that, just as a start. It's for employment law, there's a few big firms that you can go to if you want to go that route. If you have a big enough company, that's probably what you're going to do. But otherwise, I would say referrals are definitely the best way to find a good attorney to be outside counsel for your company. And
I agree.
so what I want to ask you is, when you first get hired by a company, what are the things that you notice right away about the company that set the tone for how you think things are going to go while you're defending them or helping them with a certain issue?
I think the biggest indicator of how the relationship is going to go is how the client responds to my engagement letter. That's usually the first. I say too much. I'm going to hit on this again. That's the first indication I'm going to get of how the relationship going forward in the case is going to go. And that's because I've met with a lot of people, a lot of clients, a lot of C-suite people, a lot of general counsel in their office, in my office, at a Starbucks, or wherever they want to meet for lunch. And everybody's happy. Everybody's like, oh yeah, we got the budget for this. This is all BS. Every company says the claims against them are BS, which is fine. My job to make that happen. It's BS. This is what happened. We got all the documents. We got all the facts. We got 25 witnesses. We got surveillance footage. We got an admission. We got a settlement. I mean, it's all the crap. You hear all the crap in the initial meeting, and then you ask for some documents and information, and they send you, whatever piecemeal what they have. But then at a certain point, when I review the file and I say, okay, yeah, I can help you. Absolutely. Here's my plan. Let's get you engagement letter. Get started. Yeah, cool. Sounds great. We appreciate it. We appreciate everything you're doing. Let's get on this ASAP. Cool. And it's usually at a point where a deadline is occurring in litigation that they're going to miss, or like they need a response, or they have an EEOC or in California, Labor Board Commission hearing something. It's always an urgent matter. And then you send their engagement letter, or I send the engagement letter. And it says, it's 6 or 7 pages long. It talks about how the relationship will work, communication, the scope of engagement, all that stuff. And then it comes to the payment part. Here's my hourly rate. Here's what I need up front. And then I want to say 95% of the time, but I think recently it's been better. But like a very high volume percentage of those emails get back with call me to discuss. And I'm like, I know what this is about. Fine. We call, I call, we have a meeting. Hey, so I didn't think it was gonna be that expensive. We got all these documents. Like their tone changes. And I just know from then on, it's like, well, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z, and you need to do this, and you do that. But they don't want to pay. And that's the problem. That's the biggest indication for me that it's going to be a tough relationship. The other time too is when you give advice, like let's say you consult with somebody, give some free legal non-binding advice. And again, asterisk, this show is not legal advice. It's for entertainment purposes only. We are not your attorneys. We'd love to be, but we are not. So take everything we say with a grain of salt. All of you viewers out there, every single one of you. But so give them some advice like, hey, I've reviewed your file. You're missing this, you're missing that. You're not complying with this law. You're not complying with that law. Like an HR perspective, you don't have a written employment. The employee never accepted your policies and procedures. Have them sign their documents. Some small innocuous stuff. They don't follow it. They get sued, and then they come to you asking what happened. So to kind of wrap that up in a bow, the indication I get from the client not listening to the most basic of pieces of advice is an indication of how working with them in that case is going to go.
So does that happen less when there's general counsel present, or is that something that doesn't really affect this particular issue?
Well, it depends. I have a client where, I don't know, a long time ago, I dealt with an issue that was heavily litigated and appealed, and then litigated. Big process. And we had an issue in the HR department regarding files. Significant amount of money was spent on third parties to bring the recommendations we made to compliance with the law. It was California, so in California law. And the money was spent. Again, when I say significant, I mean like multiple years' salaries of money was spent to third parties getting something done. It was never done. And then despite all of that effort, the lawsuit came in the mail, was served on the client. We got sued for the same things that they were supposed to fix. that company had general counsel, and that general counsel was very, very good at their job. I still talk to that person today. Very good, but sometimes general counsel can't control people in other departments. That was not that person's fault, general counsel's person's fault at all, but they were exposed to like, hey, Ryan, let's talk about this, even though this should have been resolved. So it just depends on the people that are working with or under or supposed to be working with or under that general counsel. But if it's a general counsel issue, like let's say it's a contract issue that you give the advice before or not, and then general counsel comes to you later with the same lawsuit, that rarely happens. Because again, most people hired for companies to do a job, do the job in the general counsel department. You know, and we'll go into detail in other departments, I'm sure soon. But I mean, on the company side, it's kind of easy to see, or for me, easy to glean a couple things quickly from the company perspective. What makes a client, you know, how I'm going to be able to tell what that client's going to be or how they're going to be. What about from your side? What do you look for in a client when they come in your office asking you to help?
Man, that's a very complicated question because I think when I'm looking at a client and deciding whether I want to represent them, you want to look for somebody who is responsible, who has documented everything, who has exhausted the process at work before coming to you. But when I see someone who's maybe comes to me and tells me that, they're guilty of harassment, hostile work environment, FEHA violations, and they're telling me very specific things, that kind of makes me a little bit worried, because then you have a Google attorney that you're dealing with, and it tends to make my job very difficult because as the attorney, you're being hired for your expertise. And so it becomes very difficult when you have a client constantly challenging you when they're paying you, well, I mean, on contingency, when you're eventually going to get paid. I think it also applies to defense too. When you have a client who's paying you for advice and then is constantly disagreeing with you or challenging you on that becomes very difficult. So that makes a bad client. And not to say you should not be asking questions from your attorney to try to understand, but this is kind of, I'm talking about a little bit more of a adversarial, constantly being challenged and looked at suspiciously by your client is a very bad sign. Another bad sign for me as a plaintiff's attorney, and I don't mean this to be cynical, but if somebody says, I'm here because on principle, it's the principle.
Oh
it's the
yeah.
principle. Oh
Yeah.
my God. As a plaintiff's attorney, that is the worst thing that you ever want to hear. That's like if you're a woman and you meet a guy who says, oh, I'm a nice guy. I'm a nice, oh my God, get away from me. Get away from me. And the problem is that the only thing I can get you as an attorney, as a plaintiff's attorney, is money. I cannot get your feelings validated. I
You
cannot
can't get principle.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I mean, I can't make you emotionally whole. And more importantly, I can't take 1/3 of your emotional validation and put it in my bank account. So, you know, what are we going to do here? You know, and people who get hung up on principle are the ones who are less likely to want to take a reasonable offer from their employer, because what I hear a lot is, oh, they're winning. They think they've beaten me. Nobody's beaten anybody at this point. You're signing a release, and you're signing a settlement agreement. The other side is not happy, so there's no way to control how they're going to feel when you're the plaintiff, that they're going to be mad, or they're going to remember you, or the CEO is going to be like up at night, or your manager. They don't care. They're the only thing that matters to them is what's the number that the plaintiff is asking for. And so a lot of times if I hear somebody who's like, I don't care about the money, I don't care about the money, I don't want to represent a person like that, because they're the most difficult type of client to try to get them to settle for a reasonable offer, because they tend to really overvalue what their claim is just based on their feelings. And up till the case gets to the jury, you're not getting a lot of value for emotional distress. What about my emotional distress? What about my emotional distress? Well, what about your emotional distress? It's not something that's easy to quantify and put a dollar amount on. And it's really why things like this go to the jury. So those for me are the most difficult kind of clients to deal with.
Yeah, that's a good point, principal. That happens on my side too. What I tell clients, because usually that comes in the first consultation or call. I really just want to make a point here, and I'm like, I love making points because that costs a lot of money, and it's going to cost you a lot of money, and I make a lot of money off of that. And I'm completely upfront with them. I said, look, if you want to make a point, just understand that the quote I'm going to give you is probably going to be double, because it's unnecessary in litigation a lot of the time. Sometimes it's necessary, you need to do these things and how the plaintiff's counsel litigates, but a lot of the time it's unnecessary and just expensive. And again, I have clients who will pay that, and it is what it is. It's their decision, but all I can do is be honest with people. Principle is unattainable unless they put I'm not going to criticize my own clients. It's usually unattainable and it's expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a kind of ephemeral concept. There's really no way. What's the exchange rate for emotional validation to dollars? I mean, there's no way that you can define that. Well, how much is it going to take for my ex-employer to be pissed off? How much would I have to get? Oh, he's only paying me 20 grand. He's probably laughing to the well, that's not really how it is, and you're never going to know anyway. All you should concentrate on is this enough money for me to have a little bit of closure in this situation? And I think the same thing applies for defense. Like, even if you think you've done nothing wrong, even if you're trying to make a principled stand, is a principled stand worth paying an extra $50,000 in legal fees and potentially having to pay more in a settlement because it's taking longer or losing at trial? Usually the answer is no.
Yeah, agreed.
And
100%.
So this is another thing that you brought up. I want to make a point, which is a big thing that clients will say. A lot of clients will complain about lack of communication with a lawyer. If you look on Yelp reviews and stuff for attorneys, that always say, "Oh, I never talked to the attorney. I never got updates." And so, what is a normal relationship between outside counsel and a company in terms of getting updates on ongoing litigation?
Yeah, that one's easy. It just depends on the client. I like to send updates every time something happens or on a monthly basis. I've had clients with multiple litigations. That's not a word. Multiple lawsuits going on at the same time, where I'd send them an update every week as the status of all cases. That helps them obviously manage internally what's going on, but also it doesn't shock them when they get a bill from the office if they have 100 cases going on at once, for example, versus a different client who may have one, and they'll get an update every couple of weeks because something happens, or every month. How many times, on this note, you do the other side, how many times do your clients call you and just complain about why they don't have money?
Oh, all the time. I mean, one of the big things I have to explain to clients is that the legal process is not like an interventionist process. It's not something that happens ideally in the middle of a shitstorm. The storm dies down, you survey all the damage, you find out exactly what's owed, and then you go after it. Judges hate to be involved in matters when things have not, the dust hasn't settled. They want the dust to settle and then basically go after it. And so that becomes very difficult with clients who think that the process is going to go very quickly, and they don't understand that one of the techniques that the defense uses and just the necessary process of a lawsuit for it to be a valid process, for it to be trustworthy process, it has to take time, and it has to go through all of the motions, no pun intended, for it to be able to be considered valid. Because if something just gets rushed through the court, and people are going to lose trust in the process. Not that things should take a long time, but they need to take a certain amount of time. And that's one of the biggest problems I have with clients, is that they think things should go quickly, or they think, well, why don't I just go explain it to the judge and the judge will understand? That's another thing that can never happen. In real court, there's no type of opportunity like in Judge Judy or something like that, where you go personally argue with the judge and make your case as a plaintiff. So that's something that we deal with a lot, and is very difficult, because again, clients overvalue their case
every single time. And that goes both ways. Like, employers, I mean, we've had multiple occasions where we get a full defense verdict against a plaintiff who files a claim, but it's always more expensive than they anticipate. So I'm assuming that's what you mean. The plaintiff thinks they were harassed at work. You represent the person. Your experience, it might be worth, I don't know, $100,000, but they think it's worth $55 bajillion.
Yes, that is actually a number I've heard come out of client's mouth. With that, I think it's a good place for us to end this segment. We're going to be right back, talk a little bit more about the relationship between attorneys and clients, talk a little bit about why plaintiffs sue, to give HR a little bit of understanding and business owners a little bit of understanding of what are the things that make it more likely that an employer or former employee is going to want to sue the company if they've been let go. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. And we're back. Thank you for sticking with us. This is the Employee Handbook Podcast with Arta and Ryan, or Ryan and Arta, depending on what flavor you like of the order. We want to quickly just talk a little bit about, in this segment, why plaintiffs sue their former employers. I think that's very important for companies to understand because it could help them administrate a little bit better and maybe make the probability of somebody who's terminated suing the company for wrongful termination go down. I think one thing I want to talk about is the feeling of emotional validation that a lot of plaintiffs come to their potential attorney when they've been fired. I think a lot of times, we touched on it in the previous segment, people, they say they want to do things on principle. I think that is a horrible thing to hear as a plaintiff's attorney, because again, all we can get you is money. I can't get you anything else but money. I can't get you an apology. I can't get you a letter. I can't get you a picture of your boss crying when he's signing. Those are all things that I can't get you. All I can get you is money. But one thing I do see is a lot of clients come in and say, I want them to feel what I feel. It's a term in psychology. What is it called? It's called projective identification. So you feel a certain way, and so you're going to behave in a way that is going to elicit similar feelings from the person who's causing you to feel this way. So in this example, it would be, I'm the plaintiff, I've just been fired, and I'm feeling lost, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling betrayed, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling all these negative emotions. And now I want the person who fired me and the company to feel the same way. And the way I'm going to accomplish is suing.
Yep. I'm sorry, I'm going to steal this from you. So
I've been talking for too long. Go.
No, it's fine. So one of the things that an employer can do to minimize exposure to potential litigation, again, I'm saying potential. If somebody sues you, a lot of the things we're going to talk about in the segment aren't going to apply. But if somebody sues you, or excuse me, before somebody sues you, to prevent that, just be a human being. Like, be empathetic, talk to the person, treat them as just like you, a human, not a piece of garbage that you want to get rid of because they did something that you don't like, or violated a policy. Like, even if they did something bad, violated a policy in a bad way, like, still treat the person as a human, whether it was a mistake or not, whether or not you like it or you agree with it. At the end of the day, we're humans, and that person's going to live on, and they're going to move on and go somewhere else and work somewhere else or whatever. But so treat them with respect, treat them with empathy, because a lot of times a simple conversation between HR and the person person who was offended by the offender, whatever, CEO, like, even an email for the CEO asking for a call could be even enough if the person never takes the opportunity to make that phone call. But being empathetic and having a discussion, like an honest, like, not recorded discussion about, like, hey, look, let's talk. I know this is what happened. I know this is what's going on. Like, let's work our way through this to resolve. And again, if the person's been fired and they're pissed off about it, that maybe that's a severance agreement. Maybe that's agreeing to provide a positive recommendation for them. Maybe it's giving them suggestions for another place to go work if you can't, resolve that issue. But really, the main one is just, before lawsuit, being empathetic, not sending nasty emails and text messages and memes, pictures or whatever, not going out and defaming the person on Instagram or Reddit or Facebook or I don't know, whatever the heck the kids do these days on social media. It's just being a human. And it's funny to say it that way. Like, it feels like such a rudimentary, like, duh thing to do, but nobody does it. Like, nobody. Are there times in your practice where someone's like, if they just would have said they were sorry, we wouldn't be here?
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, I think that's a very familiar refrain that I see. And I think we've talked in previous episodes about having a defined role for HR and management, each, respectively. And one of the important things that you do to show that you're a human is that managers are involved in the firing process to explain. And you don't always have to explain. Most states, I think, except for like South Dakota, are all at will, and you don't really owe legally an explanation to the person you're firing. If you just don't like them, they're not doing well, you say, hey, listen, we don't have a job for you anymore, you're fired, goodbye. And that's really all you legally owe them. But again, if they're getting fired by, say, an HR person they've never met, or somebody that is dispassionate and doesn't want to give them a chance to talk or ask questions, follow-ups and stuff like that, and it becomes very difficult for the person getting fired. They just feel like they're trapped and there's nothing they can do, which is what the case is. But I think that can be very harmful, and really make it more likely for them to want to sue. Than whether you take a little time. And I'm not saying that a company should sit there and just kind of humor somebody and let them rant and rave and say, oh, this is unfair and all that kind of stuff, and get into a debate on whether or not they should have been let go or not. But yeah, at the same time, there has to be a little bit of humanity in the termination process, and just as a business decision, to be a little bit cynical about it, because again, so many people come into my office and just want to get like this sense of revenge and really make them feel what I feel. And that's just, that's not possible. But again, if you can, as a company, try to do whatever you can do to minimize those resentful feelings in people that have been terminated, then you're going to be in a much better position going forward about not having to worry that they're going to come back and file suit against you.
No, agreed. And it's funny because you can't extract a pound of flesh with the court system. Like, someone's hurt, they want to hurt back, whatever. When you were talking, it reminded me of the movie Saw, when, the person in the Saw movie just wanted to get retribution or revenge for whatever these people did in their lives. And, it's making them physically hurt themselves. But that doesn't happen in law. I mean, the best you can get in law would be an injunction for someone to stop talking about something, to stop them from doing something, to make them do something like that. And obviously money. In this realm, but to me, you can't reverse time. Judges can't do that. Judges can't give you emotional support. Judges can't give you good feelings. Well, they might make you feel good, but they can't like award in a judgment that you get X amount of happy days. That doesn't happen. None of that stuff happens. And I think that's a big misconception of the court system, is that judges clearly are limited to what they can do by law, but also judges can't make people pay money. I have a lot of clients, I've had a lot of clients over the past 15 years, that have won significant like awards or obtained orders or judgments for money, but the defendant can't pay it. So again, the courts are very limited. So the legal process will be limited too for employees and for employers. That goes both ways.
Yeah, that's one thing. In also choosing clients, we talked a little bit about what an ideal client for a plaintiff's attorney is. Smaller family markets and local businesses and things like that a lot of times don't have insurance, and there's no money to pay. They're almost judgment proof, that even though employees think that these businesses are flush with cash, that many times is not really what the case is. And it becomes very difficult to explain to somebody that, hey, listen, I can't take your case because there's a very good chance that they won't pay. And so that's another thing that becomes a difficulty for and very frustrating for people when they feel like they've been taken advantage of by the work, that their employer is practically judgment proof.
Yeah, and that kind of goes the old adage of, well, it's a big company, I'll sue them, or it's a company, I'll sue them. Like, I know they have a lot of money and they don't have anything. So no, it's pretty funny.
So another thing that I want to talk about is good advice that we can give to HR managers and directors that we found on a Reddit post here. There's a Reddit post of what's the most important piece of advice, and we just want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we saw in this post and things that we agree and disagree with. And I think it's very important as attorneys also to read these posts and understand kind of boots on the ground, what's going on, what are HR directors and HR personnel dealing with that makes their job difficult, what are things that are popping up with employees, work from home issues, or talking about employee compensation and things like that are currently in the human resources zeitgeist. So the first one, which I found very interesting, that's really appropriate for us to talk about, would be
zeitgeist. I'm sorry, I can't get over that. It's a good use of the word. Just sitting here shaking my head. I know you guys can't see that in the audience, but I'm sitting here like these words are great and I have no idea what they mean. Sorry, continue.
That
I'm
is
just kidding.
that is a real University of Arizona education just shining through this podcast and showing you what we learned over in Tucson, the big words that we learned in Tucson. It wasn't just jungle juice and frat parties. There was big words being learned at University of Arizona around the turn of
it's perfect use of the word. I mean, I'm in awe of your vocabulary.
Here we are. This is what we're trying to bring people. We're trying to enlighten them and give them big words that they can take. Eschew is another one that I like to use.
Eschew, as I would say it.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. ESCH. Yep.
Banal. It's not that long, but it's powerful. That one. A lot of people don't know what it is.
We have to change the name of the podcast to what's that?
Misanthropic. That's another good one. I'm just going to name big words. Okay.
Sit here for an hour talking.
Yeah, just name big words.
Oh man.
So the first piece of advice that somebody posted, which is the top comment, is there is the law, the policy, and the right thing to do. This is like a Aristotelian level. Oh, there we go. Yeah, Aristotelian level comment that somebody has made here. Estimate agitated 224 was the person who came up with that, and I think that's a very good one. There is law, the policy, and the right thing to do. Let's talk about that from a company's perspective, and I think settling is a very good example of this little kind of, what is this? Platitude, I guess.
Tips and tricks, platitude.
Yeah.
Best practice. You said settlement agreement, right?
Yeah, well, I think settlement agreements, when it's better to settle rather than pay for costly litigation. And I think another example is the security guard versus engineer being late every day example. And I think this is a very good one for this, because it shows the policy might be that anybody in the company will get punished for being late or reprimanded and possibly fired. But how does that apply to different types of employees in a company?
Yep. So the right thing to do, obviously, would just, again, treat them as a human. Everybody's late. Everybody has problems. If the security guard is late, clearly there's more of an issue for the company's physical property, and sometimes the physical turning into electronic or digital. But the engineer being late, deadline aside, might not be that big of a deal. Obviously, there's different job responsibilities, but you can't. This is the hard part of HR, and the hard part of our job is making decisions that companies make about these specific instances be okay or not. I don't know what the right thing to do would be to treat them the same, right? Or to provide empathy, like you were saying earlier, and just general good human treatment if, depending on the circumstance. If the security guard's late, and I might be going off tangent here, if the security guard's late because they were drunk last night at a Super Bowl party versus, hey, I was running late because of traffic, my son was sick, my daughter was sick, insert random excuse here that happens to people all the time, something to take into account. But again, I don't know. That's that question. The question you asked about the security guard versus the engineer is kind of similar to what I heard the police ask in their application, which is, hey, you pulled somebody over for speeding. It was your parents. What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. It's a very good point. And I think it just goes in to the importance of explaining things to employees. If you're going to dock them for being late or whatever, and they bring up something about the engineer or whoever it is coming in late every day. At that point, you have to break it down to them and explain that, well, your job is to be here, open the door, and watch for people coming out and provide security versus somebody who's doing kind of white collar work. There is not such an emphasis on them being late or on time for the performance of or their performance in the company. And again, explaining things goes a long way to avoiding problems with employees. And I'm just saying that based on people coming in and complaining about their former employers. So the second comment that is the most upvoted here is, you're going to mess up. It's okay. And there's nothing we can't fix, but don't aim for perfection or you'll drive yourself crazy. So I think this is not the point that I necessarily want to make is avoiding perfection, but understanding that you're going to screw up, and don't try to do things that are going to cover it up, because that's when you're really going to get in trouble. Because lying and covering things up, it's usually going to get discovered, because most people are not equipped to come up with a big lie and then create all the necessary foundations to keep the lie up. And you're going to get caught if you're in a deposition, if there's a mediation and event or an investigation eventually. And so, yeah, you're going to mess up, own it, and just try to take care of it with the responsible parties. And that's going to make it so you're going to reduce really the exposure and liability long term, rather than lying about it and maybe really having it blow up into something big.
Yeah, and to add on this has been a tough life lesson for me to learn personally, just in like personal life, like doing laundry or taking out the trash. If you don't do it and you delay it for the next day or whatever, it's still going to be there. You still have to do it, except it's worse every time. And that's why I try to live by a principle of, if it'll take you less than a few minutes to do, just do it now. But oh my gosh, it is so hard to do. And the same goes and kind of translates directly to work or HR specifically. A lot of things in the human resources realm and the legal realm are just not fun. We put it bluntly, they suck. But if we don't do it, it just gets worse. It festers, it becomes a bigger problem to deal with, becomes a more inundated problem to deal with, it becomes more expensive. Whatever it is, you got to do it. So one of those things, just got to do it. I don't even know where I was going with this, but I like the conversation part of it. Just got to do it.
Oh yeah, no. Listen, what other better advice is there than you just got to do it? But it's true. I think what you're trying to say in a sense is, every job is gonna suck to some degree, and there's suck is also one of those big U of A Arizona words that we learned, but like zeitgeist. But you as an employee have to decide what you're going to take in terms of working in an environment that makes you stressed out. Every single job is going to have a certain amount of stressors that is naturally associated with it. If you're a construction worker, you have the stress of maybe being physically injured by the job, and that creates a certain type of environment. And as a HR person, there's huge stressors that you have to deal with, and then you have to decide whether it's something that you can handle, and if that's the right job for you. And I don't mean that in a way like, oh, you can't handle this and mentally, but no, it's normal. Some people do not want to have a job that causes them a lot of emotional response, because it's very difficult to terminate somebody. Very, very emotionally difficult. You're dealing with their family, their rent that they have to pay, their mortgage, finding a new job, all these things that are going to now be on their plate because they're being terminated. You are personally seeing yourself as responsible for that, and that's a lot to take on. Yep. And so that's one thing where you have to decide, like, this job, I have to be responsible enough to do the right thing in the face of having very emotionally heavy duties put on me. So a lot of people, again, will cut corners or do things that they're not supposed to do in order to avoid those types of emotional situations. But that's what really gets you in trouble.
Yep, I agree. That's a good way to say it.
Well, I mean, you really left me hanging there, because I was trying to say something smart, and hopefully you would pick up from that. But
no, I'm not good at this.
Yeah,
I'm not good at this.
Me either. I mean, we didn't plan to talk at all. I just want everybody to know that we kind of just woke up and we're like, all right, we're going to taltalk about some shit today.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I want to go over.
Our time is valuable and expensive.
I want I want to go over one more of the adages or the pieces of advice on that link that you have. And it's that you are not a decision maker. You are there to provide advice and direction
Yes.
based on the company policies and procedures. Do not take it personally.
Well, and not only do not take it personally, but here's a great thing that I think gets people, well, not a great thing, but a great example of something that gets HR people very frustrated, and also in trouble. I think people who are attracted to this job, there's a couple different ones. There's the people who are very good at their job, who don't take things personally and are very straightforward, organized, and just do their job, and those are the best type of people. But there's also, and not that it's bad to be empathetic, but there's a lot of people who want to get in there and solve problems and be somebody who employees can come talk to and a shoulder to cry on, and that becomes a very, very heavy, difficult job and heavy burden to have to bear after a while. And so one thing that happens with those types of people is that a lot of times they'll see something happening at the company that's against company policy or against HR policy or against advice they've given to C-suite employees, and they take it very personally when the company does not enact policies a certain way or listen to them. What would you say to somebody who came to you, Ryan, and said, this company is just, they're not doing any of the stuff that I told them to do. I told them this, I told them that, they don't listen. So what is your advice to an HR person who's in that position?
That's kind of goes back to what I said originally, which is you are not a decision maker. You are there to direct based on company policy and procedure. It's really HR's job, and then even more outside counsel or counsel's job to provide advice. I mean, you're not there to make business level decisions about the company and its operations. You are there to, again, be a moderator to and make sure and assist with the enforcement of company policies and procedures, and sometimes developing them, and to deal with internal investigations. All the stuffs under the HR umbrella you are there to do. You're not there to dictate policy. So I would have a nice conversation and try to lay that on them of like, look, I understand how you feel. It's very hard. I mean, in my industry with clients, when they win or lose, taking it personally, it's very hard for me not to. It's very hard to not really invest your personal thoughts, beliefs, emotions into where you work, your clients, the people you work with. But that's what that person needs to do. Again, if a very large corporation example, if the person who is talking to me about this says, hey, this very large corporation C-suite's not listening to my advice, what am I going to make them do it? Like, no one's going to make them do it. It's their decision. But again, if you give advice and it's good advice and it's not followed, somebody's going to know about it, and maybe that'll put you in a better place in the future.
But you've done your job at that point. That's the other thing.
Exactly. Thank you.
Knowing when to be satisfied that you've done your job. When you've researched the topic, when you've talked to people, when you've given your opinion that's been asked for, or uncovered something, and then you make it known to the responsible parties, then you've done your job. Your job is not necessarily for seeing the thing being followed out or carried out exactly as you envisioned, but your job is just to provide the best advice regarding your slice of the business to the decision makers, and then leave it from there. Don't take it personal. I mean, of course, everybody's has a limit for being ignored or taking things personal or whatever. But I mean, just in general, that's our best advice in that sense, because you don't want to be the one making those decisions in most cases. Those are the hard decisions that lead to getting sued, that lead to getting fired, that lead to company shakeups. Why do you want to be involved? That's a responsibility that you're not paid for. So why are you going to do stuff that you're not paid for? And I don't mean it in HR people are not smart enough or not good enough or don't deserve to be listened to. That's not what it is. It's just not your job necessarily. And in companies, especially large companies, people have to understand what their role is so they can do that role to the best of their ability. A company just not being well organized or not using its personnel efficiently or in the right way is definitely a different topic. But we're talking about in an ideal world. Don't take it personal. Just do what the job is that you've been given, and don't worry about CEO mistakes and things like that. I mean, if it's really bad, then look for another job. It's your company. You know what I mean? You're playing your role.
Well, and imagine a good example too would be like a scout for a baseball team. The scout spends a lot of time traveling around the country, around the world, trying to figure out what players would be best for the team and how the team operates. An HR person that's been asked to provide advice on a policy and how to proceed is kind of like a scout. The person does their research, they look at the policy, they try to incorporate personal experience and learning and education to put together a plan for some or options for, let's say, a C-suite to make a decision. Just like a scout would provide players that he or she believes would be good for the team. The scout doesn't make the decision of what players come. Just like the HR individual does not make the decision of what option is chosen or what path is taken. Once you have presented the options, once the scout has presented the players, your job is done. That's all you can do. If the scout proposes a player, or again, similarly, if the HR professional proposes an idea that's selected and doesn't work out, implications, whether that's a talking to, whether that's, maybe you won't rely on it next time, whatever. But if the vice versa, if they provide a player that's not selected, or the HR person provides an option or opinion that's not selected, and it turns out to be a game changer, then the company will deal with it in a different way, positively, hopefully next time.
That was a great example. I'm like shocked at how good that was.
I'm pretty proud of myself.
But that's pretty good. I like that one a lot. We should make that in one of like the clips or something. Let's see. I'm just looking over one last piece of advice. I mean, I don't really, just honestly, be okay with fucking up, and don't overextend what your job is, and not in a way that, again, that's like just stay in your place and stay in your lane and really trying to beat people down. But the more you get better at your specific job at HR, and not step out and try to worry about kind of the consequences of the advice that you've given, I think you're going to be in a much better position, because you're not going to take on emotionally the consequences of your advice, I should say. Again, like you said, hey, I think this guy should be number one. He's the best pitcher I've seen. And they take a hitter. Oh, okay. Oh, well, I did what I was paid to do, and hopefully it works out for the organization, and not turn it into a personal battle between you and the organization, or a personal crusade for things that you're an evangelist about. I mean, go tell the boss about things that you're seeing and things that you think are important. But if they don't do something about it, then that's not on you. You've already done your job.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Also, I would just say that one of the number one things that, just in general, I'm not even seeing this on there, but as an HR person, you are privy to a lot of things that are going on in the organization, in the office, personal things about people. Keep your mouth shut. Oh my God, I think that is the most important thing as an HR person, is keep your mouth shut and understand how the nature of the stuff that you know about people, and keep that to yourself, because that's something that will really piss people off and undermine your position in HR.
Yep, and not only that, like you said, it'll ruin your reputation. It'll put you in a situation where you can't get another job, because despite how big you think the world is, it's not. It just ruins a lot of things. Word gets around, bridges get burned. The last thing you want to be is someone who is known as someone who can't keep a secret, or can't keep their mouth shut, or is a water cooler conversation. Current, yeah, exactly, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your job is just to maintain a department that's kind of neutral, and not create an atmosphere where everybody is saying, oh, HR is just for the company and they're against you and all that kind of stuff, because that really poisons the well. Anyway, so that's the end of this segment. I think we've done about an hour here. I think Brian's got to go. I got to go as well. We want to thank you for listening. Big tip: if you just hit 2x or 1.5 on the playback speed, the hour becomes a lot less daunting, and you could fit it into your commute back and forth every day. So keep listening, just keep downloading all our episodes, play them 100 times, tell all your friends, all your HR buddies about our podcast. Let's keep downloading. I'm going to keep spending $200 at a time promoting this podcast on LinkedIn. So thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. Try not to stop us in public for autographs and things like that, because it becomes awkward. It starts to draw a crowd and it gets dangerous, and we don't want to create any liability. No
more public nuisance complaints, please.
Yeah, we'll probably be on like that Cameo app soon, where you could pay like $150 for a celebrity to say hello to you. what we could do, we're going to be running a contest soon, or we could do it on Cameo. We'll run a contest for listeners that if you're a subscriber and you've listened to all our podcasts, we will come to your company and fire the person of your choice.
I would love that. That'd be fun. That's a great idea.
That'd be awesome. Or, on Cameo, you could hire us on Cameo to fire somebody and then just text it to them. And it'll be me and Ryan, who nobody recognized. And
who are these jokers? What is this guy doing here?
Okay, I just got fired by these two assholes.
Why is he in a woman's dress? I'm so confused.
Well, listen, if I'm wearing it, it's not a woman's dress.
That's true.
Dress. I mean, listen, that is what a great example of discrimination here.
And I'll say, for the record, that's okay, and that's not making fun of you. That's just or the situation where anybody wear a woman's dress if they shouldn't be or shouldn't be, whatever.
Or
it's just tying the TJ Maxx joke together. That's all I was doing.
Yeah, no, if I'm wearing it, it's now a man's dress. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I don't have any more bad jokes to make, so I guess it's a good time to end it. Ryan, do you want to sign off?
Yep. Thank you, everybody. This is Ryan Ellis for myself and Mr. Arta Wildeboer, the Bob. We appreciate you. We love you. And we'll see you next episode.
Peace.